Hi, and welcome to another episode of Pooling Our Knowledge for the entrepreneurs community. I'm Stephanie Sims, and today with Judy Otten, we're going to be talking about your financial reporting requirements, who you have to report to, when, and why. So we're excited that you're here. It's been a while since Judy and I got to hang out, and I think the last time it was a little special, right, Judy? That was when we had to do something with me on Skype, and anyway. So hopefully this episode is going to go a lot smoother. But thanks everybody for watching. And Judy, if you want to say hello and let us know what's going on, what we want to talk about today.
Sure, absolutely. Hi everybody, I'm Judy Otten with GrowthCast, and as Stephanie mentioned, we're going to talk about reporting. We'll talk about when you have to do certain things, kind of keep you in line, keep you out of trouble. Keep everything running smoothly.
Cool.
And if you have any questions at any time, just type them in the comments.
Oh yes, exactly. I completely forgot. It's been so long since I ran Hangout that I've gotten lazy. That's got to be what's happening. So the reason I think maybe that we wanted to talk about this, Judy, is because I think it's a problem that you see, and I know I see it quite often. People either miss filing deadlines or they end up paying penalties because they didn't get their reports handled on time, or I think sometimes they just feel overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information that they have to share. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. In my last business, what we did was we developed a financial checklist that was just invaluable, so helpful to keep everybody on track. When we had a new bookkeeper come in or office manager come in, we could just say, okay, do this. And it told her what to do weekly, monthly, quarterly. And a lot of those were reporting obligations. So that kept things running smoothly, because I have to confess, I've missed those deadlines before. You just you get busy running your business and oops.
Right. Well, and the problem is on certain deadlines, particularly things that have to do with tax, as soon as you miss the deadline, it starts to cost you more than you would have, more than you owed. Usually,
Yeah.
The first time you miss with penalties and interest, you end up paying a fortune. So, although it's not very sexy and it's not something that people really get excited about, unless you're a geek like me, it is really important. So. Maybe the first thing to talk about, something that we were talking about in the green room, Judy, is who. Who do we have to report to? I kind of see three groups of people, and then we can talk about, kind of who's the most important. We've got obviously what I would consider your legal obligations. So, you have to do a certain amount of reporting for tax, and if you have employees, you have to add to that what's called wage reporting, which just means you have to say how much you paid people, and you have to make deposits based on those salaries. So if you have employees, just be aware that you do have additional obligations besides just paying your income tax. So that's something to keep in mind.
I think I would also add other governmental reporting. I know here in Connecticut, we have to do a filing yearly with the Secretary of State that most of the time it just says nothing's changed, but if you have changes to your board of directors or changes to your officers, you need to let them know as well.
Right. Well, and there's also the question of if you've issued additional stock. So, for example, if you take on a new investor and you've actually issued them shares of stock, a lot of times you'll have to report that to the entity, to the Secretary of State where your corporation is registered, right? So that may or may not be the same state where you do business. And something we didn't talk about, but that's important too, is many states and or cities have either, some people call it a business privilege tax, some people call it sales tax. Those are reports that you actually have to file on a very regular basis as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have that?
We do, yeah. We have that in Connecticut. We have actually both of those things in Connecticut, believe it or not. So, yeah, back to the taxes. There are a bunch of different kinds of tax reporting that businesses have to do. Income taxes, maybe paying quarterly. Income taxes certainly annually, but maybe paying quarterly income taxes. Sales tax. Here in Connecticut, it's monthly or quarterly. I think it's similar in other states that have sales tax. And then, as you mentioned, also payroll tax. Um, yeah, quarterly. I think that's quarterly everywhere. I know the
Well,
federal quarterly.
right. Well, and that's where, again, things can get sticky because what you have is you actually have, based on your salary, your total salary, you have to deposit money, for example, monthly, biweekly, or weekly, but you only file the report once a quarter. And
Yeah,
so what ends up happening is you've actually got two obligations. I've got to write the paper out and say what happened, but you also have to be making deposits along the way, and sometimes the making of the deposit is what costs you more if you miss it than filing the paperwork. So that's another reason that it's important to create, like you were talking about, a checklist or a system so that every period you review it and you ask yourself the question, at least, do I need to do this now? Because if you
yeah.
just leave it to chance, chances are it's going to get lost, which could cost you a lot of money.
Great point. We had a question on one of our earlier HOAs about outsourcing payroll, and that's a really good reason to outsource payroll, just so you don't miss those kinds of things.
Right, but the one thing to keep in mind, and I do think we talked about this before, is ultimately you're the one who gets hit with the penalties. So what you want to do is perhaps have the checklist on hand, and then, like you said, transmit it to your bookkeeper or to the people who do your payroll for you, and ask them to copy you or to send you some kind of confirmation that it's actually been done. So, while it's great to outsource, you do want to make sure you understand what your obligations are so
Yeah,
that you don't end up at the end of the year with a huge bill and you're like, what happened? And they say, oh, we didn't know, or you didn't tell us. And not that,
absolutely right.
yeah, not that you need to be scared of outsourcing, but it's important that you understand exactly what you're asking them to do.
Yeah, good point. Good point. The responsibility is still yours.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Rob's in the audience. Hi, Rob. And he brings up an important point too, which you hit on first. In a lot of states, when you start your business, they ask you to estimate your sales. And so generally the first year you'll pay very little as a deposit towards your income tax.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that all of that's going to come due in April when you file your tax return, or September if you're like some of us and file an extension. But you're going to end up with a really big tax bill as your business takes off. That's where someone who's got some experience, such as a CPA, could really help you by saying, hey, let's make quarterly deposits throughout the year, like you were talking about, Judy, so that in April or later, when you file, you're not writing a multi-thousand-dollar check just because you didn't make deposits along the way.
Yeah, great point. Great point, and good strategy to make things a little bit less impactful on you.
Right. Yeah, so I think that maybe can give everybody an idea about one set of reporting requirements, which we've made them sound really scary. If you get someone who can help you and who kind of speaks the same language as you, they shouldn't be scary. You just want to make sure you've got them all marked down so you don't miss any of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Lee made a comment about paying an accountant less per month than it would cost himself, and he said he's crap at it. So that's a great thing to do if that's not your forte.
Right. Well, and I think that's an important part of whether you're starting a business or you're just growing. That's an important part of understanding, hey, I'm good at this, let me keep doing it. Or, hey, I really suck at this, and there's no point in me pounding my head against the wall trying to make it work. Let me find somebody who's good at it and have them take care of it so it's not a constant headache.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, so if that covers what we're going to call maybe our legal reporting requirements, we've got another category of requirements which I kind of consider external, even though they're part of your company, and this would be the kind of information that you have to give to other owners, to your employees eventually, and also to anyone who's invested in your company. So for example, if you get a loan at a bank, most banks are going to want to see quarterly financial statements from you even if you're making payments on time, because they're being prudent. They're trying to make sure that things are going in the right direction with your business. And so that element of, excuse me, of being able to report to them in a way that makes sense to you, because obviously if they ask questions about it, they're going to call you and say, hey, what's going on, is very important too, even though it's not the same as the tax and sort of legal reporting we just talked about.
And what kinds of things are they usually looking for?
Well, most of the time they're going to be looking for a profit and loss statement, which is basically saying how much you sold and what it cost you to sell. So profit is what's left. And they're also going to be, most banks are going to look for both a cash flow statement and a balance sheet. The cash flow statement is going to explain where you spent your money, and the balance sheet's going to say, did you grow your value or not? I don't know. Have you seen them ask for anything additional?
No, that's typically what I've seen.
Sometimes
standard financial reports.
Right. Sometimes I have seen them ask for sales tax reports just as a confirmation of the sales number. You know, they'll ask you, okay, let me see your last quarterly sales tax report just to confirm that in your internal reporting you've actually got the right sales number and that you're not either overstating or understating your sales for the reporting authorities. Because yeah, because sometimes banks get, I mean, you know, you can understand, they would be very unhappy if all of a sudden you had a huge tax problem because you weren't reporting the right level of sales to the taxing authorities.
Sure. So, yeah, that makes sense. I haven't seen that one, but it makes perfect sense.
Well, normally it happens as you get to a higher sales number, you know. Over $1 million a year is normally when they'll start looking for it. But it's another reason that having a system to keep all this coherent is important. Because if what happens is, as you're out there and you say, oh, it's time to do the sales tax report. Let me go into the accounting and let me just pull the number. And you write that number on the sales tax report. But then when you do the monthly reporting for the bank, somehow there's a change. That's going to create lack of credibility in front of the bank. It could create a tax liability for you because you underreported your sales, and it's going to drive you nuts because you're going to have to spend at least an hour, probably more, trying to figure out why the two numbers don't match.
Yep.
So ultimately, I think it's I think, you know, it's easy for us. We're preaching to the choir, right? But I think it's really important to have a system for this and to try to make it as efficient as possible so that you're only doing this stuff once.
Yeah, good point. So those reports that you're giving to the bank really ideally would be things that you should be reviewing yourself anyway. You know, just the standard financial reports and things that your owners are going to want to see, your investors, your board of directors are likely to want to see the same kinds of information every, whatever, month, quarter, probably either monthly or quarterly.
Right, and that's where, in terms of level of detail, it's not that you want to hide things, but you really want to try to keep those guys at a pretty high level of detail in terms of what you're showing them on your financial statements. But that brings us to the third point, you know, the third category of reporting requirements, and that's you. That's you as a business owner. Because
before we get to us as a business owner, Doc made a good point that he's seen them request copies of corporate tax returns, and I have too, actually.
Well, you know, and sometimes it's exactly the same reason, whether it's sales tax reports or corporate tax returns. It's kind of just to say, hey, we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to see if you're actually telling us the truth about what you're paying tax on.
Yeah.
But that is an excellent point. So thanks for pointing that out, Doc.
Okay, so now we're getting to us, right?
Right, and I think a lot of owners, because it's the only one that doesn't have a real deadline, right? Nobody's going to walk up to you and say, hey, you. Go ahead, Judy.
Nobody's making you do it, yeah.
Right, and so unfortunately it often gets put last on the priority list, but the truth is your financial statements are one of the best tools you have to manage your business, and we've talked about this before, but you have to use them. You actually have to get the data out of the financial statements, which means you need to review them regularly. And if you're preparing them, you need to go and look for the information in your accounting system. Or if somebody else is preparing them, you need to ask that person, hey, how come rent expense is so high this month? Or how is it that we paid twice what we paid for the telephone bill this month? Or whatever your question is, and keep asking those questions until you really understand what's happening in your business.
Yeah. Another good reason to do this is that's a way to find out if there's any fraud or any funny stuff going on. Ideally you'd have some controls in place, and we could probably do a whole nother show about financial controls. But ideally you'd have some controls in place to prevent it. But
right.
At least if you're really familiar with your financials, you'll catch it.
Well, and again, what it does is if you have someone who's taking care of that part of your business and they see that you're on top of things, they're a lot less likely to say, oh, this person's not paying attention, it's not a big deal, they'll never miss it.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who kind of just looks at they bring it to you and you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, whatever, send it out. That gives them a signal that you're not looking, that you're not paying attention. And so I think it's dangerous, not only from the fact that you don't get the info to run your business, but also, like you said, if unfortunately someone is predisposed to try to do some funny business, if that's your attitude, then they may see you as a better candidate for that.
Yeah, good point. Great point.
Yeah.
So in addition to, standard financial reports, some of the things that I did with my last business is I really like to look at budget versus actuals. So I could make sure I was on track. We were a consulting firm, so I also like to look at the how much of my people's time was billable, making sure that we were running efficiently. And then, of course, looking forward. What's going forward? What do we have on deck? So we did financial reviews, informally, monthly, and then very formally for such a small company, quarterly, and went through past quickly, but we've spent much more time on future stuff than on past.
And that's where, this feedback loop that we've talked about before with your budget setting the target and your actuals telling you how close you got, once you kind of adopt that as your standard operating procedure, it doesn't become reinventing the wheel each time. It's just, oh, okay, so here was my target, here's how close I got, where do I need to adjust? What do I need to change so that I keep getting closer to my target? It's a little painful at the beginning when you have to figure it out, but relatively quickly, I would say, I don't know, Judy, maybe in 3 months of reviewing your financials, you can have a really good handle on the things that move around and what you need to look at each month.
Absolutely. So Rob's calling us out. Rob Gordon's calling us out. I heard on a radio show that only half of financial advisors do the things they advise for their clients, specifically budgeting. So fess up. Do you do all these things, P&L statements and the like? What are your systems like? Good question. You think we might be the cobbler's children?
Well, I have to admit, yes, I am. This is something that I really don't like. Like, I don't like doing bookkeeping. So yeah. I always put it off to the last minute, and it always bites me in the butt. And so what I have decided is I'm going to find somebody who's going to do it for me, because I have had it up to here with it being a last minute thing and sitting over my head. You didn't do it. You didn't do it. So while I haven't solved it yet, Rob, thank you for calling me out, and it's my plan to get it solved. However, in terms of budgets, yes, I do have a budget, and the hardest thing for me, honestly, is not going in and changing my budget too often, because I get I'm pretty reactive to feedback. Right? And so if it's been a bad day, sometimes I'll go and I'll be like, oh, there's no way that's going to work. I just have to take all those sales down. That's not going to work. And so I just have to say, no, you can't do it any more than quarterly. That's just me.
Okay. All right. And I actually have to admit that I was better in my last business when I had someone doing it. And I had a checklist and I monitored. I had a bookkeeper and an office manager both doing parts of it, and I monitored their work. And at the moment, it's just me, and I dropped a couple of balls, to be perfectly honest. So I dusted off that checklist that I mentioned from my old company, and I put those things in my calendar so I won't drop those balls anymore.
Right. And I should admit, I don't know, I don't remember if I did actually, but yes, I have paid penalties because I missed filing deadlines. And
Yeah,
so, it's not like I can sit here and say, oh no, that never happens to me or anything else, but it's because I didn't have a checklist.
yeah,
It's because
because yeah, same thing. I hadn't put the systems in place in my business, and I missed one too. And I said, oh, that's dumb. I was so mad at myself. And the next day I went in and I put the same system in place that I used for my last business, even though it's just me
right.
at the moment. So
Well, but I think that's important, and I think sometimes that's where uh, it's hard, right? Because some people are like, well, but it's just me. How could I possibly need an accountant, or how could I possibly need, a big system? Well, some stuff is so critical to your business that it's
yeah,
worth investing the time in doing it. And what I try to look at it is as excuse me, is it's a way for you to grow, right? Once you start to grow, then that system's already in place, and so you don't have to go and try to invent it while you're out there selling like hotcakes, when your
yeah,
time would be better spent selling as opposed to solving your accounting problems.
great point. Yeah, great point. Plus, you don't have time to deal with the mess that you create by not doing all of this stuff on time. I mean, all of us, I'm sure all of us are working way more hours than we'd like to be, or should be, but you don't want to create more mess for yourself to clean up.
Right. And I think, even though it's hard, and we say it to our kids. I'm guilty of it too. I say it to my kids all the time. It's going to take you longer to clean it up after if you don't do it right the first time. But it's hard, right? Sometimes you're just like, oh God, I so don't want to think about that. I just don't even want to mess with it. So, Judy, is there a way, an easy way for us to kind of organize all this so that we don't have to rack our brains every time we do it?
You know what I've done is I made the checklist that we used at my last company and that I'm newly using again. I made that available on my website. Now, you do have to give me your email address, but in exchange for your email address, I'll share this checklist with you. So if you're interested, go to growthcast.com, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get a PDF of the checklist that I'm using right now. And Rob says, no worries, the barber always needs a haircut, the cobbler always needs a new pair of shoes. Yep, that's the truth.
Well, and I think that's an important thing too, and we've talked about this before too, but I think at a certain point you have to realize you're not going to get it all done. But if you just take one step and you find one piece of the puzzle that you can kind of get working smoothly, that frees up some energy, both in your mind and in what you do every day, to go and solve the other pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah,
So, don't get discouraged just because, okay, so you have to pay the penalty one time. Well, at least that one, you're not going to miss again because you're sure it's on your calendar. And you try to get everything else lined up and you stick with your calendar so that in the future, that's one worry you can kind of push to the side and say,
yeah,
this part's taken care of.
yeah, exactly. And you shore up those systems one by one. Perfect.
Yeah. So if we're looking at kind of an organization, we've kind of talked about it, but we haven't really detailed it. So there are certain things we have to do monthly, then there are
Yeah.
certain things we have to do quarterly, and certain things we have to do each year.
And
Maybe if we run through those.
there
Oh,
may even be things that you have to do weekly or bi-weekly. Um,
okay.
so yeah, I can run through those really quickly. Things like weekly or bi-weekly would be things like payroll if you have employees. You probably want to look at your bills and see what's due. Follow up on receivables. This is a big one for cash flow And these are not, again, these are not all reporting requirements. These are just all kinds of financial tasks to run your business. Following up on receivables, that's the one thing that you can do to keep your cash flow running smoothly, is just that nice phone call. When can I expect my check? Also, 401k contributions. If you have a 401k, there's a very short window. I believe it's 5 or 7 days from the time you take the money out of your employee's paycheck till the time that you need to put it into the account. And if you miss that window, you run the risk of dequalifying your plan, which is a big freaking deal. You don't want to do that. So those are, I think those are, yeah, those are the weekly or bi-weekly, and they may be every other week, you know, like in my last business, 1 week was payroll, the next week was for the 401k contributions.
Right. And if that's the other advantage of kind of situating them on a calendar, is you can organize the tasks so that instead of having, oh my gosh, on this Friday there's 12 hours of work to be done, you can say, okay, so if I take this and I put it on this Friday, and then the following Friday we do this piece, and the following Friday we do this piece. It helps you organize whether it's your time or it's someone that you're outsourcing to. It can help you really organize that better, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So then monthly, one monthly thing that we haven't talked about was reconciling your accounts, reconciling your bank account, credit card accounts. That's another way to make sure that everything is as expected. There's no funny business going on. Sales tax might be quarterly or monthly. If you're contributing to the 401k, the employer contribution may be monthly or quarterly, depending on how your plan is set up. And then reviewing all your financial statements monthly. That's not something that I would recommend going any longer than monthly on.
Yeah. And at the beginning, if we talk about getting things in place, how long would that take? How much time could you expect for that to take?
If you're doing your accounting or having someone do your accounting, probably weekly or bi-weekly, you should be able to run those out of your accounting system. You shouldn't be using Excel for your accounting. Use a real system, QuickBooks, FreshBooks, something like that. You should be able to run those statements out, look at them. If you don't understand them at first, get a professional to help you. Get your accountant to walk you through them, or some other financial professional that you have some good rapport with, and they can explain them to you the first few times. And then the more you get familiar and comfortable with your financial statements, I think you said 2 or 3 months, you'll be able to spend, I don't know, maybe an hour going over them, maybe not even that, and just look at everything and make sure it's what you expected. There's nothing unusual there. You're tracking to your goals. You're doing what you need to be doing to grow your business. So.
Right. Well, and I really like that. To me, yes, you need to spend the time on it, but the more, it's sort of like riding a bike, the more that you do it, the less active brain power it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you've kind of gotten used to, okay, my variable expenses, normally my telephone bill is $150. Well, looking down the report, if you see that the telephone bill is $160, your brain's going to tell you, okay, let's look for something else, right? So it's not going to be every single time I have to look at every single number. As you get into the habit of looking at your statements, there'll be numbers that literally jump out at you because they're different. Yeah. And that's what's going to help you, is then the hour that you spend is not going to be an hour understanding everything. It's going to be an hour asking questions about, explain to me why this is not, this is over budget or under budget or whatever.
Yeah. And on a month where there's nothing like that, that hour may be 15 minutes.
Right. Well, exactly. And sometimes that's the benefit. If you book an hour for it and everything looks great, you can use those 45 minutes to do something else, make some sales calls.
You're right. Get those numbers bigger.
Hey, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then we have quarterly, filing your 941, your payroll statement, payroll tax statement. As you mentioned, those taxes go in as you do payroll, but the reporting of it is quarterly. If you're doing estimated income tax payments, possibly your sales tax. If it's not monthly, it's probably quarterly. And same thing with your 401k employer contribution is probably either monthly or quarterly that you're doing that.
Right.
Um,
And probably quarterly, something else you could add is if you do have investors or if you do have a loan with the bank, you'll probably have some kind of reporting package for them. But as we mentioned, if you create it within your accounting system, then all it is printing out a few extra pages.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And then annually, there are a bunch of things that you have to do annually, obviously, taxes, income taxes, business registration, filing 1099s and 1097s if you employ any outside contractor and you pay them more than $600. And I think that's going down in 15 or 16. Do you know?
I don't know that it's been decided, but in any case.
And then, I mean, annually, you're probably going to want to refresh your business plan too. If not quarterly, but annually, you might want to take a big, you know, a chunk of time, a couple of good days, and really refresh your business plan, refresh your strategic goals, sales planning, all that good stuff.
Right. And the other thing that that you're going to want to think about, and again, if you outsource your payroll, it's not a huge deal, but you do have to prepare certain reports for your your employees. You'll have to do W-2s, you'll have to do W-3, you'll have to do a Social Security filing. I mean, those are part of it, but the good news is, and I just realized we're running out of time here, but the good news is tons of this stuff can be done online. For example, you can do all your W-2 and W-3 reporting online, so it can be quick, but again, you still have to remember to go online and do it.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Yeah. And even if you are outsourcing, like we said before, you still need to check that stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's actually where an online system can be really helpful, because then you don't have to see the paper copy, right? But you can actually go online and verify what's been done.
Yeah.
You know, so it might make it more efficient for people who are comfortable with that. You know, obviously you can always still file by paper, but if you're more comfortable with that, it leaves a better trace, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I can't believe we're already out of time, but this kind of happens.
That half an hour goes by so fast.
Yeah, exactly. But I really appreciate all the info that you gave us, Judy, and I really think that, like we've always said, this is something that, while it's a little scary, you know, once you break it down into easy steps, like you've done with, you know, the calendar, it's not as scary, and it's something you can just integrate into the way you manage your business. Yeah. And so, you know, hopefully this has been useful for people. We got a lot of great comments. I want to say thank you to everybody who came to join us. And I appreciate everything that you guys are sharing. I know that there's still some conversations going on about, you know, when you report and all kinds of stuff like that. So keep that going, and if you've got questions, feel free to stick them into the comments. We'll come back to them after the show's over and answer all of them for you. So thank you so much for coming. And Judy, have you got any closing thoughts?
No, thank you, everyone. I enjoyed doing this. I hope you got value out of it, and thank you for all your comments and questions.
All right, so we will see you soon on the next Pooling Our Knowledge series, and thanks again. Take care.
Bye-bye.